Our political parties, civil society organizations, unions, and of course members of the public have urged the outgoing Eskom CEO Andre de Ruyter to name and shame the implicated minister following his claims of interference and undue pressure at public utility Eskom. Meanwhile, the ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula says that de Ruyter should report the case to the police, and this of course followed de Ruyter's explosive claims in an interview with ETV. De Ruyter, whose initial date of departure was the end of March, has been asked by the board of Eskom to step down with immediate effect, saying that he has brought the organization into disrepute. Now, on Wednesday, the National Treasury announced that it will provide the country's embattled power utility with 254 billion rand in debt relief over the next 3 years. A minister in the presidency, Mondli Gungubele, joins us now virtually to have a further discussion about these latest developments. Minister, good morning. Thanks so much for being with us. Minister, you have to unmute there, Minister.
Thank you. Sorry. One before technology, always catch up with you, Sakina.
That's a bit of a problem, given that we are already in the artificial intelligence age, Minister. But thanks so much for joining us. Welcome.
Good morning, Sakina, and great opportunity with your viewership. Thank you very much.
Minister, let me ask your initial reaction and that of the presidency on the interview that was done by Mr. Andre de Ruyter.
Well, up front, let me say, we wanted first, Sakina, to say to South Africans, there's a team in Eskom to continue to deal with load shedding. There is already exercises of finding an acting CEO with the hope in a short space of time to hire a CEO who will actually stay a long time to turn around the situation. Having said that, you see, Sakina, if you know something called the PRECA Act, meaning the prevention of combating corruption, of combating fraud and corruption activities, which is commonly known as PRECA Act, classifies CEO de Ruyter as a prescribed officer who's got an obligation to report knowledge of corruption to relevant authorities. It's quite disturbing that a man of his stature joins the chorus of allegations whilst he is in a position which makes him a prescribed officer to assist South Africans in dealing with corruption in a more effective way rather than mere allegations.
So to that end, are you therefore in agreement with the African National Congress's statement that Mr. de Ruyter should lay a charge, or, you know, that perhaps action should then be taken or pressure brought to bear on Mr. de Ruyter so that he can disclose the necessary information?
I think you will agree with me, Sakina, not because we've been perfect in everything we've been doing as government. A lot of actions have been taken with regard to corruption, whether implementing SIU finding, whether a president having put together a response plan to implement the Zondo Commission, findings, and whether it's intervening in Eskom by multidisciplinary crime unit, which has arrested no less than 43 people, which has exposed fake coal, centers in different farms, and so we can go on a lot of executives. In other words, all I'm saying, this government is known for having tried all its best to actually deal with corruption. It is just not correct for an official to send a message which is not verified, which is not authenticated about the government, especially in his capacity as an official in the position that he holds. All I'm saying, I agree with the governing party. A self-respecting CEO is supposed to actually make sure that you know the minister, that minister is KZ or is Gungubele, take that minister to the relevant authority, let South Africans processes deal with that. You cannot afford in that position to cast aspersion on a government that is trying to improve the image of this country. We want investors to come here. We want people to believe in the future of this country. People must deal with the image of this country on factual basis, especially those who are employed by government.
So that takes care effectively of Mr. Andre de Ruyter and your stance on him. What about the implicated ministers? Implicated ministers, I say, because it's not just the minister whom Mr. de Ruyter alleges has been feeding at the trough, but also the one that he spoke to. Because one would imagine that by the same logic and explanation that you just provided for Mr. de Ruyter as an accounting officer to actually report any sort of corruption that he's aware of, the minister that he spoke to, when he was told about this, equally became aware of it. What about him?
But do you know the ministers again?
No, I don't. But are you not concerned about who that minister is as well?
The reason we are saying, Sagina, it must be reported is because we want to know the minister. I mean, the Ruyter we meet, let me tell you this again. We meet with the Ruyter in regular meetings in the NECOM trying to deal with load shedding. Load shedding is also an outcome of corruption, by the way. Corruption is a contributor to load shedding because the institution has been hollowed financially and otherwise. So anything that continues to undermine those interventions in meetings that are dealing with those interventions, the Ruyter said he gives report on the state of protocol. We spoke about corruption as one of the key factors that undermine load shedding issue. He sits there, he makes this report, we deal with systemic factors. He's supposed to tell us who this minister is undermining the reason of our regular meetings with him. We do not know, Sakina.
Have you spoken to the minister to whom Mr. de Ruyter reported in his tenure as CEO of Eskom and asked him about what Mr. de Ruyter had said and whether Mr. de Ruyter had at any point raised these matters with him?
That presupposes that we know the ministers again.
No.
If you know the minister,
that's not what I'm asking.
If you know the ministers again, please tell us what the minister is.
I think, Mr. Gungubele, you're not hearing me. That's not what I'm asking. I'm saying,
let me hear you.
Mr. de Ruyter reported to the Minister of Public Enterprises. So, has the Minister of Public Enterprises at any point spoken to Mr. de Ruyter to find out, did Mr. de Ruyter at any point raise these issues with him? And have you asked Mr. Gordhan whether Mr. de Ruyter had at any point raised these issues with him?
No. That aspect is not a matter I've been aware of. Maybe I've actually, maybe that could be the part I've overlooked. That one, I can easily ask PG. We've been discussing the statement that we issued yesterday with PG. And had it been in my mind at that time, I would have asked him who the minister is. And knowing PG stands on corruption, I'll be surprised if he knows a minister who's stealing from the state and he doesn't tell us. But I don't want to speak for PG on that matter. If I knew, I would have asked PG, Minister Gordhan on that.
So, Minister Gungubele, as the minister also responsible for monitoring and evaluation in the presidency, what's your assessment of Eskom and how things have been going there through the minister whom it reports to?
Eskom, I think the Eskom situation now, Sagina, is a public knowledge. Since the president, in particular, last year, July, having further analyzed the situation and devised a plan of action of 5 interventions. The entire challenges have been articulated, whether the state of the coal-powered power stations. We've acknowledged the fact that recapacitation has been an omission. Historically, we have acknowledged that over the years, lack of maintenance and which actually led to the machinery to be where it is now. And also we've actually articulated the dangers of having Eskom as the only source of energy And now that we are opening up the resources of energy, every problem around Eskom find underlying factors in that context.
So if we edit that down, Mr. Gungubele, what are you saying to me? Eskom has failed, and Mr. De Ruyter, along with Eskom, has failed.
No. We generally, the point I want to make, Sabina, is that we've not done well in as far as Eskom is concerned, as government generally. To point to a particular minister, it involves a lot of departments. Eskom is affected by regulations. Eskom is affected by procurement procedures. Eskom is affected by policy. Eskom is affected by maintaining the entity itself. So, generally, put together, we've said and we continue to say, as government, we could have done better. That's why we spend little time now about what we cannot change, spending a lot of time about what we can do.
Yes, but in terms of monitoring and evaluation, this would inform the planning going forward, Minister Gungubele. So your assessment will inform how you actually proceed with an entity, an embattled, failing entity such as Eskom. And one would imagine that you would be a lot more pointed in terms of your assessment and in terms of your recommendations. What are your recommendations? What have they been with regard to Eskom?
Well, the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation does reporting on 6-monthly basis to Cabinet. And generally, you would have spoken about Eskom. Maybe we could have spoken better than we did before. Even DPME itself, we have acknowledged that there's a lot that we have to improve in the manner we do monitoring and evaluation, but every department has been reported about both its problem, its success and failures. That would not have excluded TPE. So
what was the evaluation of Andre De Ruyter's performance at Eskom 6 months ago, Mr. Gungubele?
Andre De Ruyter's, we don't assess TPMB. We focus more on the performance of the department. Mm-hmm. The performance of the department includes both the minister and the the TG, and the DPSA does run those issues of a specific because there's a contract. We would have analyzed the contracts, the performance agreements of all HOTs, would have evaluated their reports and so on. Where I'm sitting now, I would not come with specific as it pertains specifically to De Ruyter, except that Eskom being run by both the board and the management, there's a lot that have been omitted which have not been done, which has to be done.
So as far as the HODs, the heads of department there are concerned, it wouldn't have been a very glowing report about what's happening in the department, I would imagine, given what we are saddled with, not just at Eskom, but at some of the other entities as well under that particular portfolio.
Naturally, it would not have been a good report. If it was a good report, it would not have placed us where we are now.
So they failed, Minister.
We didn't do fine. They didn't do fine, yes.
All right. So also, with regard to all the things going on at Eskom, the allegations of the fraud and corruption that's going on there, De Ruyter had mentioned that Eskom, there was, basically fraud and theft taking place at Eskom to the value of R1 billion a month, which is, of course, eye-watering given where not just that entity is, but what it has done to South Africa broadly and South Africans largely. So as the minister in the presidency, also responsible for intelligence at this point, what is the intelligence brief on Eskom and what's happening at Eskom?
Well, when it comes to intelligence, we can discuss anything with you, Sakina, except the operations. All I'm saying is that both the intelligence and the entire cluster security has been able to uncover the corruption, that has been taking place in Eskom. There have been intervention. The effects in as far as interventions are concerned There are cases in the NPA, there are arrests, and we continue to track a number of things, and some of the dramatic reports that have occurred recently, which were in television, people being exposed, having many expensive cars. That's generally the work of intelligence, Sakina. But intelligence doesn't report every aspect of its work. But what is always reported is the intervention of the police as a result of the information at their disposal.
So in terms of what intelligence would have picked up at Eskom, in terms of what was happening with corruption and malfeasance at that entity, and I would imagine that intelligence is keeping a hawkish eye on what's happening at Eskom because of what it is and what it means to the country. Are there any high-profile or any politicians, for that matter, that you've picked up on the defense radar or on the intelligence radar?
We are tracking acts of corruption, hoping to put our finger on the individuals. Already some individuals have been arrested. As I'm saying to you, as a result of the findings of the corruption is one of the key systemic factors that undermine Eskom. A multidisciplinary committee or a multidisciplinary team on against crime, against corruption has been put together, led by Mr. Jacob from the SABC. That team is doing an excellent work now. It has been able to report a lot of cases. People have been arrested, big names. I have not come across, I wouldn't want to speak about that now until certain stages are actually arrived at, but already, Sagina, there's a lot of people who are already before the NPA. There are people who have been arrested, who are being investigated. So that team is beginning to make a huge difference, yeah.
So with regard to the criminal syndicates that have been targeting Eskom, and they have alleged to have been politically targeting the country's infrastructure, broadly speaking, we are seeing the results of that as lay people in South Africa as well. Any indications of, the intelligence and, of course, the law enforcement agencies making any headways in that regard, Mr. Gungubele?
There's a lot of evidence that is being followed. Again, I didn't want to preempt, but I can say to you, Minister Fikile, who is also a convener of the security cluster, I remember when we had a session where this reference was used, that big names, he is one of the people who are very excited to get who those names are. So we have allowed the team to do its work. We want to wait patiently when we get to those names, but we don't want to make conclusions about the names we don't know.
Well, we'll leave it there for the time being, Minister. As you know, the story will continue developing. Minister in the Presidency, Mondli Gungubele, following the announcement that Eskom CEO Ruyter has had to step down with immediate effect.